Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch Podcast. That is, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch Podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with Kim Strassel and Joe Sternberg, and I know it's tortuous to think so, but the presidential campaign is actually beginning for 2024, and we won't bore you with too much about it, but one of the candidates, of course, who could be likely to be a presidential contender is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on the Republican side, and he has been in a flap recently with his criticism that his education department levied against the College Board, which creates the group that creates advanced placement tests for high school students as they take courses to prepare for college. In particular, rejected an advanced placement, or AP as it's called, history course in American history because it was deemed too politicized and indulged in critical race theory with heavily politicized discussion about race and history. And DeSantis criticized it and was criticized in turn for not wanting to teach Florida children anything about Black American history, which I think is a canard if you look at what he actually proposed. But then this week, we get the College Board itself revising the AP history curriculum. Let's listen to David Coleman, head of the College Board, explain why it did what it did.
We at the College Board don't really look to the statements of politicians, but we do look to the record of history. So when we revised the course, there were only two things we went to. We went to what Brandy described, which is feedback from teachers and students, as well as 300 professors who have been involved in building the course. And we went back to principles that have guided AP for a long time and served us well. Mm-hmm. And what you'll find when you read it, as I hope you will, is you'll find an unflinching encounter with the facts and evidence of African American history and culture that gives young people the chance to think for themselves.
Well, Kim, I know you're unflinching in every respect, and I'm sure that you demand that your children make an unflinching face with the American history that way. The College Board says it had these revisions in place before the criticism from Florida, but the timing is certainly interesting, and the changes they've made certainly move in the direction that Florida had sought.
Yeah, here's the unflinching analysis of all of this, which is that Ron DeSantis was proven correct either way you look at it, okay? So maybe they responded to his criticism. Maybe, as they say, that these were all completed in December. But if they did complete them in December, it means that they came to the same conclusion he did, the College Board did, on its own. And, maybe they also heard some feedback from some of the other pilot schools who were involved with this, in which other people who were looking at the course had the same reaction that Ron DeSantis and Florida educators did, that this was over the top and it was not teaching kids about Florida history or African American history, as it were, but rather indoctrinating them with this critical race theory, which was spread all through it. So, and one of the other things I find kind of interesting here, and again, whether it was because of criticism from DeSantis in Florida or whether from other groups, but they also put a little balance in here as well, too. There's actually now included in here a speech that people are going to study that Condoleezza Rice gave back in 2012 to the Republican Presidential Convention. So there's a little bit of diversity of thought in there in terms of what kids are going to be studying, and that was not present previously either.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that the coverage of this, when DeSantis first unveiled the Florida Department of Education, first criticized the AP course, the original one, the media coverage was almost uniformly that DeSantis is trying to squelch Black history, trying to impose censorship on teachers, and of course, made to look through a racial prism. And as we discussed and wrote, that isn't at all what he was actually proposing. In fact, he had insisted previously that episodes of Black history that weren't taught should be indeed taught, including the 1920 Ocoee or Ocoee massacre. Pardon me, I'm not sure of the pronunciation, in which a white mob killed dozens of Black Floridians. So he wasn't trying to squelch Black history, but wanted to block its politicization based on modern values, Joe. And one observation I would have about DeSantis is, as he contemplates potential presidential run, he does seem to have a pretty good ear for which cultural fights he can win and which to avoid.
Yes, and I think that will serve him well. And this is such an interesting example of that because, I had to look through the revised AP curriculum. I would suggest listeners go to our website, and if you read our editorial on it, you'll find a link to the new document there. And it is just fascinating because you see how some of these changes actually contribute to a fuller understanding of both Black history and American history. And I think that sort of is a cultural fight that is worth fighting for conservatives. In fact, you can think of ways that they could have gone even a little bit further in offering a more comprehensive understanding both of Black American history and its relationship to the broader stream of American history. And I think that there is kind of a desire among conservatives especially, but perhaps among a lot of more moderate or independent voters to just feel like there is this clearer sense of Americanness or what it is to be an American. And I think that this kind of fight was really about that as much or more than about any particular culture war point scoring against people on the far left. And I think that is a fight that's worth having.
Yeah, Kim, I think the central point where I would like us to get to as a country and an education is to understand that Black history is integral to American history. It's part and parcel of American history and should be taught as part of that. I was frankly, a hole in my education on that point was the discovery in the last couple of years about that horrible Tulsa massacre of a century ago, where essentially a white mob killed, I think, literally hundreds of Black Americans in Oklahoma. And I was not taught that as a young man. I mean, I was taught other things, but I was not taught that, and I should have been. And to the extent to which that kind of history becomes more integrated into American instruction, great. What you want to avoid is basically turning American history into a struggle session. Is all about race and the modern debates over things like reparations for slavery and intersectionality and modern LGBTQ studies, all of that stuff, which was in the original document that I think much of which they have taken out. And that's a good thing.
I couldn't agree with you more, Paul, that African American history is integral to U.S. history. And we need to be doing a better job of teaching it in those primary courses. I've seen this with my own children, especially at the grade school level and middle school level, that the courses that they take, they're very top level. And that's understandable, especially at very young ages. But even to the degree that they discuss African American history, it tends to be its own separate unit, and it tends to focus on the same people over and over, much more placed in the modern civil rights movement, Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. Very important people to know, but there's obviously an enormous amount more to African American history through every single year of American history that is really important. Now, I do think that the AP course that currently deals with U.S. history is very good on that. And so it does kind of call into question the necessity for an entirely separate course, which I think, as I mentioned on a prior podcast, it's a course too that it's not one of the core AP courses that most kids will be taking. So this really is more of a kind of an elective offering. And I think this needs to be viewed in that regard. I hope we're getting to a discussion too where we're simply having a broader debate in the country about the need for better history teaching, which is something that has fallen by the wayside. People are very focused on math and reading scores, which obviously matter, but we've got a lot of problems in that area too.
Yeah, we sure do. And particularly with the just basic understanding and instruction in the core of American constitutional framework, how the U.S. government works, why it was set up the way it was, what it is supposed to accomplish. There's so little understanding of that now. And many schools teach that badly if they teach it at all. Okay, thanks to Joe Sternberg. Thanks to Kim Strassel. And we're here every day on Potomac Watch, and we'll be back tomorrow with more conversations about the politics and economic debates of the day. Thanks very much for listening.